So I rewatched How Stella Got Her Groove Back, thinking that I was going to be taken back in time to a romantic black classic, only to realize that this movie aged horribly. And let me explain how. So in the movie, Stella is a successful stockbroker and is also a single mom to her preteen son, Quincy. Stella is a workaholic and she hasn't had any type of romance in her life in quite a while. She sees an ad on TV for Jamaica and decides to be spontaneous and book a trip to Jamaica with her best friend. On her first day in Jamaica, she's running along on the beach and then meets Winston, who is a local on the island. He invites her to meet at a pajama party where their romance takes off from there and is not just a vacation fling, but turns into a real relationship. Stella does leave Jamaica, but ends up going back to visit Winston with her son and his cousin. While there, she does meet Winston's mother. Winston does end up going to the US to stay with Stella, and their personalities do clash, and they do have some issues while he's staying there. Winston does decide to propose to Stella, and she leaves him hanging for about a week until she decides to accept his proposal and does the cliche catch them before they leave scene, in which she is able to stop him in the airport before he leaves to go back to Jamaica. And they live happily ever after. Sounds like your run of the mill romance, right? Wrong. Because Stella is 40 and Winston is 20. Gross. And there is some mention of his age being a bit of a problem in the movie. I hear you're a cradle robber. So Winston's mom does disapprove of the age difference, and they do clash because Winston thinks that Stella is controlling and Stella thinks that Winston is immature.
So now you're gonna scold me like some school child?
Well, you're behaving like one, wouldn't you say?
But the theme of the movie isn't about how some age gap relationships are predatory. The theme of the movie is about how to make a relationship work against all odds. So, what would prompt someone to make this movie with such a huge age gap relationship and such a weird age gap relationship? Well, this movie was made because it's based on someone's real life. So, How Stella Got Her Groove Back is a movie adaptation of a book by the same name, which was written by the author Terry McMillan, who based the book on her real life. Well, it's loosely based on her real life. Yes, in real life, Terry McMillan was a 43-year-old woman who got into a relationship and married a 20-year-old young man named Jonathan. According to an article on Oprah.com, Terry McMillan was on a vacation in Jamaica when she met Winston and she pursued him. Interesting. They also got married like in the movie, but there was no happily ever after in this real life scenario. 6 years into their marriage or their whole relationship, Jonathan came out as being gay.
Who wants to tell their wife that they're gay?
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay, how long had you known before you actually told her?
2 years.
They filed for divorce, and even though Jonathan signed a prenup, he sued for spousal support and he won. So, do I think that Jonathan played her from the very beginning? Yes, I do.
So when you married her, you had no inclination whatsoever that you were gay?
Right.
How does that happen?
Do I feel sorry for Terry McMillan? Absolutely not. I believe he said when he met her, he didn't know that she was a famous author, which I can believe because of the demographic that she wrote books for and his age and that he's a man. I would say probably middle-aged women, black women were reading her books for the most part. So I would believe that he didn't know who she was, but once he did know who she was and he found out that she was probably wealthy, I do think that he went along with it to upgrade his life. In the movie, it looks like he does come from an upper middle class family. I don't know if that was the case in real life, but either way, most people are not making money like a famous author like Terry McMillan. So yeah, I do think he played her from the very beginning. Now, let's talk about the 20-year age gap. Now, even if you don't agree with like a huge age gap relationship, I'm pretty sure we can all agree that it really does depend on the age of the younger person on how gross the relationship is. So, 40 and 60, No one cares. People might give you, like, the side eye, but no one cares. Like, 40, you're grown. Um, 30 and 50, yes, you might get some judgment, but again, you're grown, you've had life experiences, you don't have to really answer to anyone. 20 and 40, that is weird. Like, no, absolutely not. Someone called the freaking police. And yes, it is very legal for a 40-year-old to date a 20-year-old in the United States. But if you depend on the government for your moral compass or you use the government as your moral compass, then you have other problems, seriously. Now, of course, the US government does suck in very many ways, but I will say our laws are way ahead of a lot of other nations when it comes to protecting younger people, specifically with the age of consent. However, with it being a law, you have to draw the line in the sand somewhere to give concrete guidance to people on how things work. So, for instance, you have to be 21 to drink alcohol, period. Like, there's no other way around it. That's just what it is. So, with the age of consent, they had to pick an age of consent. So people know that's just what it is. That's clear. Yeah, there may be some nuance to some of it, but at the end of the day, it's 18 in most states. Some states are different. Whatever, gross. But yeah, most states give clear guidance on what the age of consent is. But does that make it morally okay? Absolutely not. It is not okay for some 40-year-old to date someone who's fresh out of high school. Like, back in the day when the tabloids are counting down the days for Britney Spears or Mary-Kate and Ashley Austin to turn 18, and it's like, "And what?" So what they turn 18, they're still basically kids in my mind. And if you're the type of person to say that times were different back then or it was okay back then honestly, you're a part of the problem. And I'm going to be using the word predator and bring up people who have done actual crimes in my next examples. But just to use them as examples, I'm in no way calling Terry McMillan a predator. She didn't do anything illegal, but just want to throw that out there. I don't want any heat from Terry McMillan or anybody else. But it's just my opinion that what she did is morally wrong. So when people say that times were different back then or it was okay back then, you really have to ask yourself why. Why was it okay back then? Why did people do this back then? And then it's not really seen as okay now. And I believe one of the reasons is because predators gravitate towards positions of power or they use what power they do have to prey on more vulnerable people. These same people exist, but society continues to evolve in a way that calls out these people and doesn't make it so easy for them to prey on others. And with predators, you may have people who are complicit and assist them with their predatory behavior because they stand to gain something, or people who are aware of this behavior but are afraid to speak up because they may lose out on whatever benefits they get, or they're afraid of the backlash. This is the case with that one guy with the one movement started. Um, you know what movement I'm talking about, pretty recent. All it took was for one person to speak up about his behavior, and that made other people feel safe to come out with their stories and to speak up about it. And that caused a whole cultural shift to happen because it was very normal in Hollywood for, the casting couch or these things were open secrets, right? So when someone finally came out with how a bigwig in the Hollywood industry was acting or being predatory, this completely changed how things happen in Hollywood. I'm sure I'm sure some of these things still go on, but I bet you people are way more scared and way more cautious um, before they even try to do anything predatory towards other people because people like were getting caught out left and right like after this happened or during this whole movement. There's also male centered women who will take the side of the predator There are literally women who blame the 14-year-old girl in that tape with R. Kelly for being fast instead of blaming the adult in the situation. Yes, I remember this. It happened. And we don't want to talk about how we're willing to forgive the sins of some celebrities who have some sketchy behavior as long as they come out with a bop. We are willing to call them out, but when they come out with the bop, we sweep it all under the rug. And society has really just started taking boys and young men seriously who get preyed upon or victimized. And that honestly is probably the main reason why this movie did not get the side eye is because, people don't take young men getting preyed upon seriously, especially if it's by a woman. So I would say that age gap relationships are fine. I'm totally fine with age gap relationships, depending on how old the younger person is. 20 and 40, definitely that's too young and too old. That is predatory, in my opinion, to be 40 and pursuing a 20-year-old man, woman, whatever. No, that 20-year-old has no life experience. I'm not saying none at all. Of course, people have different life experiences. I'm not saying that someone who's 20 isn't intelligent or wise or had any common sense or street smarts. I'm sure they do, but compared to a 40-year-old, it's just a different ball game. You're in two completely different timelines. And yes, times have changed, but times have changed for the better. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.